Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode, number 112, is Stitch and Flip Tips and Tricks. Stay tuned to the end of the episode. I will announce the winner of the Amaryllis quilt and show you next week's giveaway. Stitch and flip. These techniques are used by Lori Holt. You've seen my quilted witch before. This is Elizabeth Hartman, one of her very first, if not her first, Fancy Forest. And these are all done using stitch and flip techniques. People sometimes think they're foundation paper pieced, but they're traditionally pieced. And what she does, both of these ladies do, is they get these angles by placing squares here and drawing a diagonal line and sewing, and then pressing the piece back and trimming off the excess. I will show you on a little sample if you have not done this before. But all of these are done stitch and flip. Some are with squares, some are with rectangles. But anytime you see this 45-degree angle, they're all here in these tiny little hair pieces. They're all over. Here's another one on the pumpkin. That's how they get the shapes to make the pictures that make their quilts. So let's go through my tips. My first tip is to label your pieces. The pieces are sometimes so close in size that visually you can't see for sure which is which. Sometimes I'll put, if there's a lot of the same size piece, I'll put them in a baggie and put their letter on the outside of the baggie. But oftentimes there's just one or two, maybe sometimes four. But what I do is I take my friction pen and I actually write the letter on the back of the piece. And then when you go to the ironing board and you iron your piece, it's gone. So it really helps you stay organized. So either labeling the pieces with a friction pen or placing in a baggie will really help you stay organized. The next tip I have is to make right and left units at the same time. Now, mostly when I look at Elizabeth Hartman's patterns, she does have you do left and right sides at the same time. But Lori Holt's patterns have you make a whole left boot and then make a whole right boot. And I find it much easier to sew these at the same time. For one reason is I keep laying them out on my table, and you'll see me sometimes going like this or going like this to make sure that my angles are going in the right direction, because the one thing that's super easy to do on these patterns is to sew your diagonal line in the wrong direction, and then your piece is wrong, then you're ripping and resewing. But I find it easier to sew them both at the same time. You can feed into your machine your left piece and then your right piece. You can clip off the first one and move on to the next piece for the left. And same thing, feed in that one, pull off the right one. I hope I'm making sense. But for me, it's always easier to do two at a time rather than one at a time, and keep stopping the machine and restarting and stopping and restarting. My next tip is when you're sewing your diagonal line, you draw your line corner to corner, and depending on which way you're going to press the square, you want to sew just a tidge. The sewing line should kiss your drawn line. If I'm on this side, I'm pressing this side up to the right. If I were going to press this one down to the left, I would have my sewing line just slightly over here. And I'm going to try to show you on this. I'm going to hold it up to the camera. I did a chalk line. So the chalk line is slightly below the stitched line. And that's because the stitched line is going, the stitched line here on top is the side that we're going to flip this up. And this makes it so that you definitely cover the whole corner. If my stitching line was too low, when I fold this up, I may not reach the corner. So that's why I like to sew just kissing the drawn line. Now, the next tip is I trim the back of this before I cut off the excess piece. So if you can see here, you can see there's a little bit of brown peeking out right here, little tiny bit. So I take my ruler and I trim this off so that it's totally even to the white piece. And then when I press up, this brown triangle will meet exactly where it should. And then I take a ruler and cutter and trim off this excess square. Now, if you've watched my shows at all, you know that I don't like waste and I don't like trimming off half square triangles and then having to either toss them in the dog bin pile or find another use for them. In this case, these are so tiny that are coming off that this little teeny bit here doesn't bother me at all. I just put it right in the dog bed bag. So we've gotten to trim the base piece. The next thing that you might want to do, and I don't always do this because I like getting up and walking to the ironing board and keep moving, but you may want to set up an ironing station. You can use a wool mat. There's all kinds of other mats you can purchase, but set something up because your pieces that you're pressing are small. You generally don't need a whole ironing board. So this is a little bit of a time saver of not getting up and walking to the ironing board each time. Now, my last tip, of course, is my favorite because I always like to change a pattern to make it mine. So my last tip is make changes to the pattern and make it your own. And I am currently working on the quilted scarecrow of Lori Holt's, and I'm doing the same thing I did on the witch. I'm making it 50% size, but I wanted to make some other changes, and I want to show you what I did wrong, so that you can have some confidence in yourself in altering patterns and make it your own. So give me a second. We're going to switch out the board. So here is the quilted scarecrow of Lori Holt's that I'm working on now. And of course, I always want to make changes. So here's the pattern. And as you can see, the scarecrow's arms are spread out totally straight all the way across. This quilt is 80 by 85, so it's huge. And like I said before, when I did the witch, I'd rather do something smaller that can be a wall hanging. So I went to 50% size. But I still thought he was going to be a little too wide. So I decided I wanted to turn his arm down on this side to make it a little narrower. So what I want to encourage you to do is if you try to do something and it doesn't work the first time, try again. You can always use scrap fabric, old fabric that you bought years ago that you have no idea why you bought it. But to turn the corners, and I actually studied a bunch of Lori's patterns or blocks from other books to see what was the best way, and I found the apron block, and it had the straps turning a corner. So I used that as my model, and the first time I did it, it didn't work. So I tried again and got this the right width, but the way you can turn the corner is by taking a rectangle of the fabric, which is the red gingham, and putting a small triangle on one side and a large triangle on the other side. Well, I should say triangle. You start with a square, like we talked about before, draw your diagonal line corner to corner. So flip up, press, and then of course you cut off the excess that would have been behind here. And I did then eventually get it the way I wanted it. I still am kind of struggling on the lengths. I'm not sure mathematically how to make sure they're exactly right, but for me now, visually, it works. So I think I'm going to go with it. The other thing that happened, and this is what happens when you change patterns, is things happen that never occurred to you. So he's got his arm up like this in the pattern with his thumb up and palm towards you. Well, when you go down like this, your palm now is facing the back. If I left this garden glove the way it was when I made it originally, his hand would be like this. Well, obviously that's not how your hand would go. If you would be this way. So I had to remake this glove to match how the hand would be once you're this way instead of this way. So there's always something that comes up that you never thought of, but you can always come up with a solution. One other thing that I did is in the pattern, the pumpkin has 4 different fabrics across, 4 pieces. And in quilting, I really like odd numbers. I would rather have 3 or 5. So I decided I wanted to do that. And so I made this pumpkin. And one thing that I did was by doing a 5th, I could use just 3 colors and repeat A, B, C, B, A across. Now, I did this one in the proportion that the original one was done. And if you recall, my purpose was trying to make it skinnier. Well, if I leave the proportion the same, this is still wide, and I'm not taking advantage of the arm coming down. So I may make a skinnier pumpkin. I have not yet decided, but I obviously have the option. I can finish this pumpkin and put it in something else. But it's going to be, as I lay this all out, is this too wide for this? I'm not sure yet. I have to lay it out. But those are the kinds of things that you want to think about. I'm trying to make it skinnier, but I didn't here and did here. So it's your project. You get to do whatever you want. But I do highly encourage you to go ahead and experiment with changes that make sense for you for the end project that you want to create. So that's it on the stitch and flip. Let's get to the giveaways. Okay, the winner of the Amaryllis quilt, and I have to say, I chuckled when I chose this name, when this name came up. Knucklehead. Knuklhed. please email me at quiltersheaveninc@gmail.com with your address so I can get this out to you. This week's giveaway, I'm calling it Geisha Girl. I hope that's not offensive to anybody. I didn't know what else to call it. See if I can get it right side up to show you. It's kind of large. It's 60 by 75. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. In your comment, be sure you put in Geisha Girl, and you will be entered to win. And next week, we'll announce the winner of this one. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I encourage you to try the Lori Holt and Elizabeth Hartman patterns. They are so much fun. And until next time, happy sewing.